Good morning, everyone. 92% of Canadians have expressed some level of concern with respects to their privacy. And 81% of those Canadians want clear rules to protect their data. And 74% of those Canadians think that they actually have less protection today than they did 10 years ago. That's why we launched the Digital Charter, a set of 10 principles to guide legislative reform and policies and programs for our government. And that's why I introduced legislation today to give Canadians more control and greater transparency over how companies handle their personal information. C'est pourquoi nous avons lancé la Charte du numérique et ces 10 principes qui vont orienter la réforme législative et permettraient aux Canadiens d'avoir l'assurance que leurs données sont en sécurité en ligne. Et c'est pourquoi j'ai présenté aujourd'hui une loi qui donne plus de contrôle et plus grande transparence aux Canadiens. The Consumer Privacy Protection Act. There's a few key elements of it that I want to highlight. One is around greater control, and that means that Canadians now will be able to make sure that when they go online, that the consent that they provide will be presented to them in plain, simple language, not a 30-page legal document. There'll be more transparency, and that means Canadians will better understand how their data is collected and how that data is used. Canadians will also have more control with regards to portability. That means they'll be able to take their data from one entity and one organization and be able to transfer that to another entity and another organization. And Canadians will be able to demand that their information be deleted or destroyed if they withdraw consent. And in order to make sure that Canadians can feel confident about having more control over their data, companies that do not comply with privacy legislation will have the strongest fines in the G7, up to 5% of global revenues. And this is not only good for consumers and Canadians, this legislation is also good for businesses. It provides a clear framework. It enables businesses to have the predictability that they need to pursue responsible innovation. And because Canadians will have more trust, that will enable businesses to make the investments they need to leverage the data in a meaningful way to grow their business, create jobs, access markets, become more competitive and productive. And we all know that data has a lot of potential. Presently, the global data economy is pegged at $3 trillion. So this will help Canadian companies plan for the economic recovery as well. La pandémie de COVID-19 nous a amené à compter plus que jamais sur l'économie numérique. La loi va aider les Canadiens à profiter de cette nouvelle réalité et à avoir confiance que leurs renseignements personnels sont en sécurité. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to increase our reliance on the digital economy, the CPPA, the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, will help Canadians embrace this new world, knowing that their personal information is safe. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And I'll take any questions that you may have.
Nous allons maintenant passer aux questions, commençant par les questions au téléphone. Un petit rappel, une question suivie par journaliste seulement. We'll now take questions, starting with questions on the phone. Quick reminder, one question, one follow-up per reporter. Operator, do we have a first question?
Yes. The first question is from David Ljunggren from Reuters Canada. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, Minister. How does what you've announced today, how can one compare that to what's happening, for example, to the GDPR in Europe and also American laws on privacy? Are they pretty much the same, or are there big differences between the two?
So we clearly have strengthened our privacy laws, and it's important to note that the last time such changes occurred were 20 years ago when PIPRA was first introduced. Back then, there was no social media, there was no Internet of Things, and so it was important for us to modernize our privacy legislation. And we did so in a manner that is interoperable with the Europe set of laws. So GDPR is something that is going to be adequate for businesses. So advocacy does apply to GDPR. And also the enforcement mechanisms that we have in our privacy legislation are the strongest amongst the G7 countries. And so that is stronger than the California Privacy Act as well that you alluded to. So we're very confident that Canadians will have strong privacy laws in place to give them greater control. Meaningful accountability exists and transparency as well. And this is good not only for consumers, but this is good for business as well, as they can make plans to move forward in a responsible way to drive innovation, become more competitive and productive, and be part of the economic recovery coming out of the COVID-19.
And secondly, you talked about potential fines of 5% of global revenue. Can you talk us through how that process would work? I'm sure that major companies would not be hit with this fine immediately. Can you give us an idea of how the process would unfold up to the point whereby such a fine was imposed?
So we have given the Privacy Commissioner order-making powers, and that means the Privacy Commissioner can request companies to delete information, can request companies to withhold information and data if it is not properly obtained through meaningful consent. And the Privacy Commissioner will also have the ability to make recommendations for fines. And that information then will be given to the tribunal. And as I've indicated, up to 5% of global revenues can be subjected to fines for non-compliance. This process is designed to also help small and medium-sized businesses. It enables them to work with the Privacy Commissioner to create a code of conduct and to provide an opportunity to engage with the Privacy Commissioner to get those insights and support, as well as to make sure there is a seamless process with the tribunal as well to avoid long, lengthy court proceedings. But it's really a focus not only on the fines. It's important to note that this legislation will encourage companies to comply with the law. Because of that accountability measure, compliance is what we're focused on. And because compliance will exist, Canadians will have greater confidence and trust, which is good for our economy, and it's good for the privacy of Canadians as well.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
La question suivante est de Émilie Bergeron de l'agence QMI. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Bains. J'aimerais savoir combien de temps les entreprises vont avoir pour se conformer à ces nouvelles règles. Est-ce qu'il va y avoir une période de transition pour leur permettre de s'adapter?
C'est une très bonne question. Absolument, nous allons avoir une période pour comprendre les lois pour les petites et moyennes entreprises particulièrement. Mais c'est absolument essentiel d'avoir la confiance. C'est pourquoi aujourd'hui j'ai présenté la loi qui va aider les entreprises et qui va présenter beaucoup de possibilités pour la croissance économique. Et aussi, c'est nécessaire d'avoir un cadre pour les entreprises aussi.
OK, mais vous n'avez pas répondu. Donc, c'est combien de temps la période tampon, disons, avant qu'il y ait des sanctions?
C'est très bonne question.
Avant que des sanctions s'appliquent?
Oui, c'est très bonne question. Je vais avoir un très bon débat aux chambres des communes et après, la loi va être déterminer le temps et je vais présenter les détails pour dans 2-3 heures pour la période de les brefs technicales.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
The next question is from Tom Korski from Publication Black. Please go ahead.
Ask you, there's not a single reporter here who could ask an intelligent question because you haven't released the text of the bill. Why do you do that?
Well, parliamentary privilege. The bill was just presented this morning. Now that the bill is made available, Canadians will have the opportunity to see how we're protecting their privacy. And it's important that we engage in the democratic process and debate this issue in the House of Commons. And there'll be a technical briefing as well that will enable yourself and others to ask all the technical questions that you may have. And I'm here at your disposal to answer any specific questions you may have.
Sure. So I'll ask you about a bill that I can't read. It's a public document, Minister. 2 years ago, you had breach of security safeguard regulations that invoked $100,000 fines failing to report breaches of customer data. We're unaware of a single instance in which that fine has been levied. Is that your understanding?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question. We understand that breaches are a serious concern for Canadians. That is why we brought forward regulations to make it very clear if such breaches do occur, the onus is on the company to update the privacy commissioner as well as the individual. And the failure to do so would lead up to a $100,000 fine per breach. And so you can imagine companies that have breaches in the thousands, if not millions. This would be a significant fine if they fail to update the privacy commissioner as well as the individuals that have undergone the breach. So we're very confident that these regulations, again, provide additional accountability for Canadians.
Forgive me, I'm just clarifying, that's zero enforcement in 2 years, right?
We've put the regulations in place and we made it very clear that they're designed to protect Canadians' privacy. And more importantly, in this particular case, when breaches do occur, it is absolutely essential that the companies update the privacy commissioner as well as the individuals, and failure to do so would lead up to a $100,000 fine per breach. And this is a significant fine, and we brought these regulations in to protect Canadians.
We'll now take questions from the room. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions dans la salle. Juliane?
Oui, bonjour, Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada. Peut-être nous dire, est-ce que vous pensez que ce projet de loi va garantir qu'on ne verra plus jamais de mauvaise utilisation ou vol des données? Est-ce que les changements que vous proposez sont à ce point puissants aujourd'hui?
Vous avez posé une très bonne question et merci pour la question. La loi de 2020 sur la mise en œuvre de la charte du numérique vise à 5 choses. Accroître les paramètres de contrôle et de transparence lors du traitement de renseignements personnels par les entreprises, donner aux Canadiens le droit de transmettre de manière sécuritaire leurs renseignements d'une entreprise à l'autre, et donner le droit aux Canadiens de demander la destruction des renseignements personnels qu'ils ont fournis à une entreprise, et fournir aux commissaires à la vie privée des pouvoirs étendus pour rendre des ordonnances aux entreprises et appliquer, dans le cas des infractions les plus sérieuses, des sanctions parmi les plus sévères au sein des pays du G7. Les sanctions pourront aller jusqu'à 5% du revenu global.
Suivi?
Okay. Là, vous venez de lire votre déclaration, donc c'est pas exactement ce que je cherchais, mais...
Désolé.
C'est pas grave.
J'espère la prochaine fois.
Oui. Qu'est-ce que vous dites aux Canadiens qui, dans les dernières années, ont vu certaines de leurs données être utilisées à mauvais escient, des données, dans certains cas, qui ont été volées? Est-ce que ce que vous proposez aujourd'hui, ça va permettre de rattraper le retard qu'on a vu dans les dernières années et être vraiment à jour de façon concrète? Est-ce que le mécanisme va être assez puissant pour qu'on évite tout problème?
C'est une situation très problématique. C'est pourquoi aujourd'hui j'ai présenté la loi qui va cibler cette chose, qui va protéger les Canadiens. C'est pourquoi les manières de la loi va cibler l'importance d'avoir une stratégie pour protéger les Canadiens. Et c'est pourquoi j'ai indiqué cinq choses qui vont donner la confiance pour les Canadiens, d'avoir la confiance des Canadiens.
Mia?
Morning, Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. I'm just curious, given that the bill, I believe, was just tabled and we haven't had a chance to see it, will you commit to coming back and answering more questions in this room once we've had a chance to actually read the legislation?
Oh, I'd be more than glad to. I'll be doing interviews all day. I'll be engaging with the media all day. So I'd be more than glad to have the opportunity to answer any questions you may have. The technical briefing will take place at noon, as I've indicated, to provide any specific technical issues that you may have. And you can also reach out to my office, and I can answer any questions throughout the day that you may want to pose to me.
So you won't be coming back here, I guess. Okay. I'm also wondering, explain how this fits with our existing Privacy and Protection Act and what role the Ethics Commissioner plays.
So this is updating our PIPEDA laws, and we're modernizing our PIPEDA legislation. We're telling Canadians that we're going to strengthen our privacy laws. We're focused very much on making sure that they have greater control over their data. And there's going to be meaningful accountability by making sure that we have the strongest fines amongst the G7. We're also giving order-making powers to the Privacy Commissioner. The Privacy Commissioner will be able to delete data, would be able to make sure that data is no longer collected if it's not appropriately done so through the meaningful process with regards to consent. And so we've been very clear that this order-making power will also give the Privacy Commission the ability to set fines and provide those recommendations to the tribunal. And so this is consistent with the conversations I've had with many experts and many Canadians. And we're confident this law will not only protect Canadians and give them more control and provide greater transparency, but this is also good for businesses that were looking for predictability. We're looking for a clear framework when it comes to making business decisions with respects to data.
Kevin?
Minister Bains, you talked about the tribunal process. How will this be faster? I mean, just take us through a scenario where, let's say there's a breach and I find out someone has my data and I'd like it to be erased. That seems like quite a process now to go through with the Privacy Commissioner and perhaps a tribunal. So what's sort of the timeline when there is a violation of this new privacy laws?
So if you're a Canadian, the whole objective is to make sure you have more control over your data. So I've highlighted different aspects of consent in plain, simple language, transferring data from one organization to another. And to your point, Canadians can demand very clearly that their data be deleted or that their data be destroyed once they withdraw their consent. And a failure to do so, then they can officially launch a complaint with the Privacy Commissioner, who would then look into the complaint. And if the individual the request is not fulfilled and that the organization does not comply with the privacy legislation, then they're called administrative monetary penalties, AMPs, that the tribunal would receive a recommendation from the Privacy Commissioner on what that fine should be. And so we believe those fines are significant. And in instances of serious penalties, that can be up to 5% of global revenue. So we're talking about potentially billions of dollars. And so that's the process. It really empowers Canadians to quickly be able to approach the Privacy Commissioner if they feel that their personal data and their personal information was not deleted as per their request. And if the Privacy Commissioner finds the organization or company in non-compliance, then they can quickly recommend a fine and the tribunal can look into it in a timely manner.
How will this affect the budget of the Privacy Commissioner's office? Will the Commissioner need more staff, more resources? There's a potential here that the Commissioner could become overwhelmed with complaints from Canadians, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And we will make sure that the Privacy Commissioner gets the appropriate resources he or she needs on a going forward basis. And we'll make sure that they have the resources to make sure that they're able to execute the order-making powers to protect Canadians' privacy.
Is it there now, though? What needs to change for the Privacy Commissioner's office?
The Privacy Commissioner's office has been very clear in the conversations I've had with the Privacy Commissioner and the engagement that I've had with him is to strengthen our privacy laws. And that's exactly what we've demonstrated today. We've been very clear about giving more control to Canadians, greater accountability and transparency. And this will empower Canadians to have trust when they go online, because more Canadians are working online, more Canadians are learning online, shopping online, accessing critical information online. And so they need to have confidence and trust. And that's what this legislation does. And this legislation will also give more order-making power to the Privacy Commissioner which will enable us to have greater accountability for companies and organizations that are non-compliant.
We have time for one more question on the phone. Operator, do we have a question?
Yes, the next question is from Mr. Jim Bronskill from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Bains. In what circumstance, perhaps you could give us examples of when you see fines being levied against companies? What sort of things do you have in mind here?
So take, for example, a Canadian is using an app and decides to no longer use that app and reaches out to that company that is responsible for that app or that application. And they say, look, we want to have our information destroyed and deleted, and we're going to withdraw our consent. And if the company fails to follow through on that commitment, then the individual is able to take that complaint to the privacy commissioner. And there's a tribunal as well that would look at administering the fines for non-compliance. So there is a clear amount of control given to Canadians with regards to their data and protecting their privacy. And there's meaningful accountability in terms of significant fines that would be levied for companies that do not follow through on the requests of Canadians with regards to their ability to control their data.
Okay, another thing that the Privacy Commissioner has requested is inspection powers, basically the ability to go in and audit companies to ensure that they're respecting the law. Is this included in the bill, which we, again, have not had time to read?
Yes, the bill does include those powers to enable the Privacy Commissioner to do the appropriate investigations it needs to make sure that the company is compliant with the privacy legislation. There's significant order-making powers for the Privacy Commissioner, which is designed, again, to protect Canadians and to make it very clear that we're focused on compliance. That's what we want to focus on. The fines are there to provide accountability, but we want businesses to comply with the law because it's about creating trust. If we want Canadians to feel confident online, to be able to navigate online, they need to make sure that their privacy is protected and that they have greater control over their data.
David, do you have a question? Nope. This concludes the press conference.
Okay. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.